Hello and welcome to season 14, episode 4 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading Russell Kirk's The Conservative Mind, this time talking about chapter 4, Romantics and Utilitarians. An interesting chapter on some figures that I really knew nothing about before reading this. I had at least heard the names of Coleridge, but the other, George Canning, I really knew nothing about him. But we're kind of going back to British politics for this chapter here.
Yes, I must confess my ignorance as well.
What do you think of this chapter?
I liked it. I hate, I used to be a utilitarian. I used to,
Really?
in my youth, I used to think that it was the bee's knees.
Hmm.
And then even some of the principles, I even was a big supporter in my, I don't know, 30s, maybe even the 40s. As it came when it came to like public spending on infrastructure projects. I think I alluded to this before, but well, now Tucker Carlson's kind of going off the deep end, but he made a lot of good points
Hmm.
before he went a little crazy. Maybe, I don't know, um, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we should question everything. Anyway, but he had a good point about architecture that we've talked about in art.
Hmm.
Real as a society, it's important to have beautiful buildings. As the early Christian leaders, realized that it's a really kind of a form of worship. And if you have this brutalist, really utilitarian style, you kind of suck the soul out of
Yeah.
the culture or the society. And so I've really come around on the aesthetics that, you know what, if you're building public buildings, you should spend more
Hmm.
um, so that it's building is not only functional but beautiful. And I would have never said that, and certainly in my 20s and 30s, just because it costs more money. That you shouldn't waste public money on aesthetics
Right.
because I didn't recognize the good, but they don't talk about that here. But I think that's kind of a flavor of the same idea that you can come to some sort of mathematical equation when you weigh everything out, and then you just pick the policy, and that's also joined up with the leveling of democracy, so that everybody gets a vote on everything as much as you can. And if 50% plus one is in favor of a policy, well, then that's the right policy.
Hmm.
And and that's just dangerous um, public policy. So
Yeah.
it was neat to see that, explained at length in this chapter and also refuted by these conservative leaders of that time.
Yeah. I like the quote he starts off from Coleridge, the big block quote at the beginning of the chapter. It says,
Yeah.
"It is this accursed practice of forever considering only what seems expedient for the occasion, disjoined from all principle or enlarged systems of action, of never listening to the true and unerring impulses of our better nature, which has led the colder-hearted men to the study of political economy, which has turned our parliament into a real committee of public safety. In it is all power vested, and in a few years we shall either be governed by an aristocracy, or what is still more likely, by a contemptible democratical oligarchy of glib economists, compared to which the worst form of aristocracy would be a blessing." So talking about utilitarianism here, right? Removing anything beyond just what is most expedient. And I like his overview, gives kind of a quick overview of utilitarianism there in like pages 100 and 101, talking about, of course, Jeremy Bentham with his test of merit utility, determined in each case by a judicious weighing of pains and pleasures. He says that appealed powerfully to the aggressive industrialists of the new age, who disliked phrases like right reason, natural justice, and good taste as much as did Bentham himself. Right, so this practice, like you kind of alluded to, right, just this a mathematical plotting out of what is the greatest utility for the government to do in this situation, right? That is sort of the aim of these utilitarians, and that's just sort of what they base their whole political philosophy off of.
Yes, and I'm not discounting that you should have some of that as
Hmm.
part of your calculation. I'm a big fan of grid patterned uh, um, metropolis city planning.
Hmm.
Uh,
Metropolitan, I think, is the adjective you're looking for.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Isn't metropolitan considered like effeminate fashion now? I think it's
Yeah,
really
a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but maybe not. Maybe I'll bring Metropolitan back, like Justin Timberlake brought Sexy back. Um, I'm sorry, I'm a little tired.
I
I
can tell.
had well, Mondays are not great,
Hmm.
part of life, but they're necessary because if you don't have Monday, then Tuesday will become Monday, and so on and so forth. And so you have to have a Monday.
That is true.
But I had a municipal docket that seems to be growing and growing and growing. So I had 500 and something cases on the
Wow.
docket this morning, and I had the trials in the afternoon, which thankfully none of the defendants showed up for trial. So we just issued warrants.
Hmm.
But then I had to attend an in-bank meeting, which is a meeting of the judges.
Hmm.
And then I went to a city Kimswick Board of Alderman meeting and had to leave that early. Shucks. And to go to yet another meeting
Oh, fun.
in another city for a planning and zoning issue. And then I came home and ate, and now here I am. I am. I
That's
am.
that's an exciting day.
So, but in the brief period of time that I'm losing my mind this evening
Hmm.
before this started, I came up with a brilliant idea, which I'm going to share with you now.
Oh, good.
I was telling Eli I should. This is we. He won't ever do it. I should start a new like a boys youth group. Yeah, I've been down on the scouts,
Hmm.
because they used to
Hmm.
be Boy Scouts and now they're just scouts,
Right.
whatever that is. Um, and they're kind of withering away, which is sad because it used to be
Hmm.
great. So I want to have the skunks, and instead of the two-finger salute of the scouts, we
Uh-huh.
do that two-finger salute. We say "Oi!" So the viewer can see,
Uh-huh.
obviously, what
Uh-huh.
I'm, but the listener will have to imagine.
That's that's
Uh,
ridiculous.
and uh, we'll have to model some of the behaviors after the British 80s TV show, The Younger Ones, because they often
Mm-hmm.
would often go, Oi.
That's true. That's true.
So I'm sorry to go down that path, but I've lost my mind.
Well, that's good. That'll make for a good episode. The other point he
But
mentions
wait a
when he's,
second, wait a
oh,
second.
go ahead.
You didn't say what you thought of this chapter.
No, I
You
thought it
just
was good. I thought it was a good overview. I'm sometimes a little skeptical of sort of the romantics.
really.
Sometimes, it's sort of a broader label that's a little bit amorphous.
Hmm.
But no, I think generally there was some really good stuff in here. I mean, Russell Kirk is of course always a great writer. Not that it was a good sort of diagnosis of the problem and a good overview of what the romantics did instead.
It was my understanding from talking to one of our listeners that you are in fact romantic.
What?
That you have a sense of romance.
Hmm. This is going to be a weird episode.
So what don't you like about the romantics? Just that it encompasses too much, ill-defined, and maybe a little loosey-goosey
There's a
with
part
their
of it. There's a part of it that's also a little bit idealistic. It tends, I think, towards progressivism,
mm,
especially like in the more romantic sort of literature movements. A lot of those authors were just really kind of wild, like just abandon all social norms and things like that. So now at this period of time, right, they're sort of the good counterpart to the utilitarian, right? We don't have the utilitarian influence, right? Emphasize the good and the human person and things like that.
yeah,
But they're good as a counterbalance, but not always good sort of on their own.
understood. Fair
Yes.
enough. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm waiting for one chapter in all of, we have yet to have a chapter of any book that we had in any season where you said that was just awful.
No, we did the George Lakoff book that we read a long time ago.
That's right. Yeah, we
Yes,
didn't,
that was a really terrible book.
that was hard to get through.
Yes.
That's good.
I think that was the worst book we've ever read.
Oh, just for the
For the
podcast?
podcast, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. You've probably read
Yeah,
worse
yeah.
books, but
Yeah, because I kept making crude references to his name.
yes, yeah. I've read worse books than that just on my own time. I read one. Well, I don't know if this book was worse. It was definitely not good. But I read Noam Chomsky's Cartesian Linguistics this past
Uh,
week, which is
really?
him. Yeah, him trying to tie in his sort of linguistic ideas into a broader philosophical framework. I don't think he knows anything about the philosophers that he's talking about, and also all of his philosophy is terrible.
Mm.
And he also tries to like weave in his politics about how essentially his ideas. He wants to emphasize sort of human free will and like the endless creative potential of language, which is good. Except by creative potential, he just means the ability to make infinite sentences. And also, language is a physical thing embedded within the brain somehow. And also, we are born with concepts. We don't form some concepts. Like we are just innately in them, like it's in our DNA somehow. And from that, he derives that autonomy is the most basic human good, and therefore we need to put in place an ideal society that will restore enlightenment moral values,
Huh.
whatever that means.
Yeah. Seems a rather vague
Yes, it is.
philosophy. Now, was he in the Epstein records, or am I thinking
He
of somebody else?
was. He was. Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
like, they were pals, weren't
Yeah.
they?
Pretty frequent flyer, I think. Yeah. And
Interesting.
he's still alive. He is,
Yeah.
I
He's
think,
old as dirt.
97, 96, 97. I think he lives in Brazil now.
Yeah.
He lives in some place in Brazil.
As he
So
should.
yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I'm starting to believe, and I don't know this about him, but I'm starting to believe that some of our celebrities, artists, and that sort of thing, I'm starting to believe in like the old well, it's an old story, but old tale. But they call it the crossroads, like for the old music
Mm,
blues musicians, where they go to the crossroads, they sell their soul.
hmm.
That was an old Ralph Macchio movie called The
Yeah.
Crossroads. Not bad actually.
I
He was
think I
already.
think you got me the soundtrack to it.
Oh, the soundtrack's
Yeah.
great
Yeah. On
for
vinyl.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
good. It's very good.
he has a like a stylized battle, like the fiddler's battle from
Hmm.
what is it?
Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah, except for it's guitar players,
Hmm.
and he's against Steve Vai, who, if you know Steve Vai, a great rock guitar
Hmm.
player, playing the Satan type character. And little spoiler alert: our hero Ralph Macchio wins that
Hmm.
battle, but he wins because he was classically trained in the Spanish guitar method,
Hmm.
and he integrated that with his rock and roll blues sensibilities that it was guided by his like guardian angel type figure,
Interesting.
old blues guy,
Huh.
and won his soul back. I think is how it
Wow.
ended.
Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
yeah. So anyway, back to the my original theory. I'm
Yes.
starting to actually believe that a lot of these people sold their souls. Like that's why that like Chomsky has such a long life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to be really famous and live to 100. And, deal. And then and he came up with all his weird ideas.
Yes.
I don't really mean that I think that he sold his soul, but him in particular. But don't you think there's like a lot of people, and then there's so many of them that were like cursed, like they became so rich and wealthy, but they were miserable, and then they
Mm.
had overdoses and stuff. It's just really tragic.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Anyway, back to
yep.
the book. He, of course, talks about Bentham here. He talks about James Mill, John Stuart Mill, and about how they sort of each step along the process really more and more emphasize this utilitarianism. He also says, sort of looking at a little bit in the United States, he says 20th century political and juridical realism and pragmatism, triumphant now in the Supreme Court of the United States and throughout nearly all of the world, are derived from Bentham. Possibly,
Mm.
however, the legal philosophy of Bentham may come to be considered as pregnant with social decay, as some thinkers now believe his moral ideas were. So he didn't want to. He wanted to get rid of natural law doctrines. He wanted to get rid of any sort of moral philosophy within politics. It seems remove it away from any sort of religious principles. Only consider like this sort of material utilitarian good throughout politics.
Yeah, and he designed the first ever really kind of like a pod system
Mm,
in incarcerated individuals, which is really way ahead of its time. So you could have like one centralized control booth, and you can see into numerous pods. I forget what they
yeah,
call it. It's referenced in the book.
yeah.
It was groundbreaking. And it is, that sort of utilitarianism is our criminal justice system
Yeah.
now, mixed in with a bunch of bleeding heart Reformation type
Hmm.
gobbledygook. Like people can, if you just throw enough resources on them, you can reform them.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not against providing resources to people in need, or making effort to rehabilitate people,
Hmm.
but there has to be some buy-in there, and a lot of times it's just a way to get out of jail early if you complete the programs. But that's a whole nother story. But actually, it is part referenced in here about how our dominant uh, legal theories are really utilitarian.
Hmm.
I mean, it comes down to it, and we have procedural rights. We're
Right.
still get bogged down in procedure, whether due process was granted, whether the proper hearing, the proper standard of review was
Hmm.
provided, and there's really very little emphasis on the dominant legal theory, which is really conservative legal theory, really little evidence on the outcomes, which is fascinating because the three, especially in the Supreme Court, the three liberal Supreme Court members seem to be obviously outcome derivative. They figure what is it we want to get
Hmm.
as an outcome of this case, and they work their way backwards from that for the most part,
Right.
especially Jackson.
Hmm.
But the conservative is like this utilitarian process thinking, not even, listen, we don't care what the result is.
Yeah.
We just want to have the right procedure and apply the law objectively.
Hmm.
Well, that's really a utilitarian outlook, and I think that has really failed us over the last, or my lifetime, last
Yeah.
50 years.
Yeah, it really only works if the procedure is working towards some good, right? Not that the like the determined, end goal of whatever individual case is, right? You're not just sort of working backwards from whatever you want the decision to be, but that the good that you are trying to pursue is some real thing,
Yes.
not just the vague outcome of procedures. And he says that at the bottom of page 105, he says utilitarian disregard for security against state and majority is sufficiently illustrated by Bentham's anxiety to establish administrative law and
Uh,
administrative tribunals unchecked by customary rules of justice, right? Whatever just sort of these administrative boards do, right? Sort of elected, right? Just majority sort of opinion amongst all these boards. That's the most efficient, most optimal, most utilitarian way to carry out sort of justice within politics.
well, the funny thing is, the administrative law has been expanded in the last 60 years to uh, unanticipated lengths. And
Hmm.
then you also see arbitration, which is deciding cases outside of the court system. But the funny thing that I think is really amusing now is how left-wing anti-ICE advocates don't understand that the due process that illegal immigrants, or what I call documented foreign citizens, because that's what they really are, the documented foreign citizens have limited procedural rights, and they're all administrative
Hmm.
initially. And then there's a deferential judicial review of the process. So there's great deference provided to these. They're essentially administrative law judges, these immigration judges. It's all the administrative side of it. These are not originating in federal court for the most part. These are all set up, and the judges are appointed by the attorney general, not by the president or Congress or any sort of other oversight. It is actually, you get the appointment and sworn in by the Attorney General Pam Bondi of the United States, and you're the immigration judge, and they're the ones making these decisions on asylum and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So it's kind of funny how I consider Bentham's utilitarianism more on the left
Hmm.
now. And this administrative process is getting them caught up because you could really streamline administrative process because there's not a lot of oversight and there's great deference to it. And because you want to have, when you set up an administrative process, you want to have the experts decide. So
Right.
that necessarily means the people are out of it. There's
Hmm.
no right to a jury trial. There's no oversight by any elected representatives. You have two or three layers between the administrative process and any sort of political influence, and
Right.
that leads to more efficient outcomes, but doesn't lead necessarily to justice, which is
Right.
fascinating to me.
Right, and I like, throughout this, we kind of haven't mentioned him yet, but as he's talking about Bentham, he's also providing quotes from Walter Scott, who I think was a Scottish politician at the time, a sort of a romantic, countered him. He's a novelist and a poet, as well. He says, this is on page 106, he says, "The state of high civilization to which we have arrived is perhaps scarcely a national blessing, since, while the few are improved to the highest point, the many are in proportion tantalized and degraded, and the same nation displays at the same time the very highest and the very lowest state in which the human race can exist in point of intellect. As our numbers grew, our wants multiplied, and here we are, contending with increasing difficulties by the force of repeated inventions. Whether we shall at last eat each other, as of yore, or whether the earth will get a flap with a comet's tail first, who but the Reverend Mr. Irving will venture to pronounce?" So he's a little bit of a pessimistic voice in here, but he's seeing
Yeah.
this rapid industrialization, this rapid sort of utilitarianism in politics, and he says this isn't helping anybody, right? You're just sort of increasing, what people think they want, right? You're sort of, some earlier quotes about how this is sort of erasing any sense of national identity, right? Everything's just becoming the same monotonous, boring, drab industrial landscape,
Yeah.
right? And it's, I think, even more true today. So he's one of the strong voices, as these things were going into place, trying to argue against them. And ultimately, I think the utilitarianism at the time was a much bigger influence than him.
Yeah, and don't you think though that the tide is turning a little bit though? I mean, I'm seeing
Hmm.
a little bit as far as commercial and governmental building as an example, and I just feel like the people want a little bit more out of society than what they're getting now from this antiseptic and
Hmm.
electronic device driven world. But what I really liked is before your quote, which is
Hmm.
great. There's a great summary of what the Romantics were really looking for. So 106, he says, what the Romantics dreaded in a world subject to utilitarian domination was an indiscriminate destruction of variety, loveliness, and ancient rights in the name of devouring industrialism and a Philistine materialism. I thought
Hmm.
that was just a beautiful description from this author of what they value. And I think it makes a great point. I think if you ask people like about that quote, do you agree with that? Do you also dread that type of utilitarian domination? I think the vast majority of people would say, yeah, I want variety in life. I
Hmm.
want loveliness and beauty. And loveliness is, I thought, was a really good term to use because it's not just pretty.
Hmm.
There's something I don't know, spiritual or magical about the term loveliness. Like if
Hmm.
you ever say, "Oh, that's lovely," that's
Hmm.
different, than pretty or beautiful. It's pleasant. It's a different. I just thought it was just a perfect
Hmm.
description of what a romantic would want out of the world. Like obviously based in love.
Right. Yeah. I've never
I'm
thought
getting.
about that. Yeah, I think you're right, about that. It's a good
I
word.
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Seeing all this nonsense of my craziness tonight, I came up with something good. But actually, I'm just quoting the author. So, but I did recognize his brilliance, so that makes me the next level brilliant.
Well, there you go. Yes, of course.
You seem
Um,
weird too. It's like you just want
I've
this thing to be over.
no, that's not true. I was just looking ahead. I'm always looking for other quotes,
Yes.
as you're talking, but I think that kind of brings us to the next big section on page
Yeah.
108, which is on George Canning, and it seems like he was kind of a hard person to pin down into any one, category. He says, Lord Brougham called George Canning a liberal Tory. Others have doubted whether Canning was a Tory at all. And strictly speaking, he was not. He erected the Conservative Party and made the word conservative part of the English political vocabulary. And then he, continues on a little bit later. Says, well, is he really, actually a romantic? Not quite, but a lot of the romantics really liked his sort of political philosophy. He was kind of an ally to them, right? So it's a lot of, sort of back and forth on, what exactly he is. But he kind of summarizes at the bottom of 108. He says George Canning was romantic in the sense that Burke had been romantic. He apprehended the complexity, the variety, the mystery of creation and human nature. He knew that the past governs the present, that motives and wants cannot be reduced to rigid formulas, that all simple forms of government are bad, that much in human character is beyond mundane laws. And he became, not super influential in politics, it seems. I forget where he has it in here, but he was prime minister for all of like a few
Four,
months, I
yeah.
believe.
Four,
4 months.
months.
Yeah.
And then cashiered him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And
he
then,
died not too long after that. I think a couple
right.
years after.
Yeah, and his
Yeah. So
only.
yeah. So like I think the author is making an argument for for him to be this person to be respected more than he is.
Mhm,
You know, or he was at the time of writing it. I'm not sure I'm convinced, but seems like a neat dude.
mhm.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and he says, yeah, the only piece of positive legislation that he passed during that brief hour of triumph, the Corn Bill, was defeated in the Lords through the influence of Wellington. So, like, the only actual policy accomplishment he had was later defeated. He said a lot of people were really suspicious of him, the old Tories, especially, because of his advocacy of Catholic emancipation in Ireland and his
Yeah.
popularity in liberal circles because of his struggle against Metternich in Castlereagh. I'm not sure who those figures are. But really, he says Canning acted in conformity to the conservative system of Burke. He had no wish to sponsor the revolutionary spirit in South America or Greece or Portugal, but he understood that a true national spirit of independence, once it has revealed itself and successfully asserted its power, must be accepted as reality. He says this is really proof of the profundity of Canning's conservatism, right? The Catholic emancipation, the quadruple alliance. But he says the old Tories forsook him, and once he was gone, they huddled behind Peel, who surrendered to the Liberals more than Canning ever dreamed of conceding. And a lot of what he says, I think, in this section is really like what could have been if Canning had
Yeah.
stayed in charge. Right? Is that literally liberalism would not have progressed as far as it would have. The Reform Bill would have been very different. Would not have been as utilitarian. Something would have passed. Change was needed in England, but under his guidance, it would have been a better form of change. But essentially, everybody just capitulated to the utilitarians.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's one of those kind of counterfactuals. You know, would it
Hmm.
have been better or worse? You know, you just never know. But I really appreciated the discussion. But
Hmm.
I don't know the answer. He's making an argument, obviously, but I know nothing about British politics of that era. What I did like, and I thought was kind of provocative,
Hmm.
not intentionally, at the very bottom of 113, he's talking about his philosophy and what how he thought um, that the government should be doing for the people. This is a quote here. It says, "What men really are seeking or ought to seek is not the right to govern themselves, but the right to be governed well."
Mm.
And I think I think that puts the nail on the head of why people support Trump
Mm.
in a way, or support whoever their candidate is that has a troubled history, because they all have weird histories. But it's not that they expect that they're going to govern themselves. They just want the results,
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people, especially the Republican Party, forget about that. Like they say, well, we believe in low tariffs, blah 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 blah, and whatever their principled positions are. People don't care about that. I
Right.
mean, if it works, they care about it. But if it's not like the voters are philosophically tied to a particular public policy, economic policy.
Hmm.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, which is a utilitarian argument. But when you talk about like, do we really want to be the ones making the decisions?
Hmm.
I mean, when you're really honest about it, it's kind of the answer is kind of no. And when you really delve down to everybody, left, right, center, or whatever, only the power hungry really want to be the ones governing themselves and others.
Right.
But really, we just want to be governed well. I don't want
Right.
to have to go to the Festus City Council meetings where I live and make those decisions. I don't want
Hmm.
to,
Yeah.
but I want to be governed well.
Right.
You
And
know?
he says this in connection because Canning was opposed to universal suffrage.
Yes.
And I kind of like this discussion. He says the genius of English polity is a spirit of corporation based upon the idea of neighborhood. Cities,
Yeah.
parishes, townships, guilds, professions, and trades are the corporate bodies which constitute the state. He says if voting becomes a universal and arbitrary right, citizens become mere political atoms rather than members of venerable corporations, and in time this anonymous mass of voters will degenerate into a pure democracy, inlaid with a peerage and topped with a crown, but in reality the enthronement of demagoguery and mediocrity. And that leads into the quote that you gave. And I think it's really interesting, like a really like almost like ennobling look at not universal suffrage of saying, well, no,
Yeah.
there is something actually. You will lose dignity if you are afforded the universal right to vote because now you no longer are tied to your home. You're no longer tied to what you do, right? There's no more dignity in your work than in anybody else's, or no more dignity in your life than anybody else's, because you're just an isolated atom, right? You've all been leveled out in this sort of spirit of utilitarianism. I thought that was really interesting, because you definitely don't hear that argument articulated these days. It's just a given now that universal suffrage is the norm. But putting in those terms, like, well, no, it's based off of smaller like societies within the society, right? That's really what society is made up of. It's not made of individual units, as we've talked about in the past. That was interesting.
Yeah, and well, it really is like a defense of a different type of representative government, of
Hmm.
course.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not. I mean, of course, I've said before, I'm not advocating for a system where people cannot vote, but I do advocate for a system where no one else but me votes. But I think it is kind of it opened my eyes or my mind to the possibility of a different organizational representative government, where it's not just everybody votes in the same elections in the same way.
Hmm.
Maybe I wouldn't be voting as individual Mark Bishop living in this county in Missouri. I'd be voting as Mark Bishop, one of many attorneys. And we would,
Hmm.
the attorneys get a vote on some things, or,
Hmm.
like he says, like a corporate
Yeah.
representative. And I never even considered the possibility of it's like a trade union, like
Right.
the pipe fitters or whatever, which has been done in different contexts, but fascinating
Hmm.
discussion. Not in favor of it, but
Hmm.
I think I need to think more on that. Those interesting ideas.
Right. Yeah, because ultimately he says, Canning was removed from power, essentially. Reform bill passed, immediate universal suffrage.
Right.
And he says really that changed the like political makeup of all of England, right? And he says in some ways it isn't even like the same constitution in some way, right? You just completely changed how the society functioned, kind of overnight, it seems, at least by Kirk's sort of descriptions here. But yeah, he concludes this section on Canning on 115. He says,
Yeah.
so much for spilt milk. Canning indicated the most enlightened and astute line of resistance for conservatives, if he did no more. He instilled in conservatism that suppleness of mind and breadth of purpose which have enabled the English conservatives to run a tenacious and reasonably consistent course for a century and a half, longer than any other political party in history. So it's really more so in his attitudes, right, sort of his beliefs that sort of were instilled into conservatism, rather than any actual political power that he wielded.
Yes. Then he moves on to this guy Coleridge. Did you ever
Hmm.
hear of this guy? I
Yeah, I've
never.
heard of Coleridge. Yeah, Samuel Coleridge.
Yeah.
More so, I think, as a poet,
Oh,
rather than anybody sort of involved with politics. I think I might even have some of his poems in one of the Harvard classics over there. I might. I'm not sure. But yeah, yeah, and I know of him, but I haven't read any of his stuff yet.
well, I like how he discusses him. I mean,
Mhm.
it's again, it's an interesting discussion where he says Bentham considered a received opinion. He said, "Is it true?" While Coleridge, confronted with the same opinion, asked, "What does it mean?"
Mm,
I'm still trying to figure out what the difference is between those. Is it true, and what does it mean?
mm,
I mean, and I know there's a difference,
yeah.
but
Well,
can I
but,
articulate it that well? I mean, he talks about, that Coleridge once distinguishes between understanding,
mhm,
uh, which, uh, which is the mere reflective faculty, and reason, which is a higher faculty employing our powers of intuition, the organ of the supersensuous.
mhm. There's a good pronunciation there. I think it's just super sensuous. But
Sensuous.
yes, yeah, no,
There's a there's an UOUS.
yes,
US.
yes,
US.
correct. Thanks for that. I like that discussion a lot, the difference between what is it true and what does it mean. Nowadays, modern sort of analytic philosophers of language will tell you that's the same thing. And really, the meaning of a word is just all of the conditions necessary for it to be true in a given context, which I think is kind of bogus. But yeah, no, I like what he says because then he says right after that quote you gave, he says, understanding is concerned with means, reason with ends. right? And if you don't have an understanding of the ends, or if you have too simple of an understanding of the ends, right, the sort of Benthamite utilitarianism of just the sort of maximal possible good, defined by avoidance of pain or pursuit of pleasure or what have you. He says, well, that's not really a good use of reason, right? The ends are higher than that, right? The end of a human being is more than just that. We
Yeah.
can argue about the means to get there, but clearly that you cannot boil down the end of a human person to just that.
Yeah, and I love that in that same paragraph at the end, and maybe you had this prepared to be quoted, but I'm going to say it. The author says this obliteration of the higher instincts of mankind was commenced by Descartes and Locke, and the Benthamites try to carry it to its ultimate conclusion of a godless and purposeless determinism. Determinism.
Determinism.
Determinism. Determinism.
Yes, determinism.
So we're emphasizing that word, but
Yes.
not pronouncing it correctly. But I thought that was a great summary of where the utilitarianism gets you.
Hmm.
It flows from Descartes just trying to say, well, it's pure reason. I'm going to figure everything out from my own mind. And there's no before me, and there's
Hmm.
no natural law that exists prior to me or after me to some extent. And then, it ends up just being godless and purposeless determinism
Hmm.
because it's just you just figure out what did I pronounce it wrong again?
Yeah, you said determinism.
I put a T in there, didn't it?
Yes, you keep putting a T in there. Yeah,
Determinism.
determinism. Yes. Anyway, I think I completely cut you off mid-statement, but
That's okay. Nobody was listening. Did I ever tell you the story of my almost semester-long debate with a philosophy professor?
I think you have told me this, yeah, about like free will and everything, and whether
Yeah,
everything's
he
determined.
was
Yeah.
he was what always bothered me was when professors tried to sell you on
Mm,
whatever the pet theories were and advocate in the class. It's like, dude, I'm taking the class, teach the class. I don't need, this is not, you're not the priest, to convert me. But
hmm.
he believed in soft determinism, where he said, the vast majority of our stuff is determined by physical outcomes. You're hungry because you haven't eaten, blah, 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 but there's this core element that is pure free will.
Hmm.
And he give an example. And of course, any example you give, you can make an argument that that was in fact caused by some physical factor.
Of course. Yes.
There's no way you can't find a way to argue
Hmm.
that whatever it is that's the exception to that determinism
Hmm.
rule. And so he would make this long, he had this thing, and I got aggravated. So I said, well, isn't it true that that could have been just caused by X, Y, and Z? Well, I don't know. And then, the class is over because the class is over. I thought it was over because he covered it wasn't a determinism class.
Hmm.
It was like metaphysics. And
Hmm.
so it's like a ton of different topics. So he says, well, before I go on to I don't know, ethics or whatever, the next topic was, I want to mention something. Mr. Bishop here said that it was determinism, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to make a counter argument to that because
Hmm.
we ended the class with that. He make that argument. And so then, of course, I took the bait, as you know. I mean, I was more argumentative then than you ever have known me to be.
Hmm.
I was, by the end of the semester, everyone hated me in that class. We went on, I don't know how many classes, but it was weeks
Yeah.
where half the class was a debate between me and this idiot professor about whether or not there
Wow.
was determinism or hard determinism.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
I
we,
should
we
know how to say determinism.
you should. We actually just had a speaker come talk about exactly that with the Thomistic
Really?
Institute speaker. Yeah, Dr. Joshua Hochschild of Mount St. Mary's University, great guy, came to speak on free will. Whether or not, I think his subtitle was like the metaphysics of choice or something. Really
All right.
interesting lecture because it was really more so about the way that we talk about determinism and free will is vastly different than any pre-modern idea. Because like he says, right, all of the sort of modern ideas, like the Sam Harris of, well, everything's just physical, man, just responding to physical stimuli, everything's in the brain, chemicals, neurons, whatever, that sort of determinism. Like I don't really actually think anything. I'm just a collection of atoms and guided on whatever path I'm just naturally guided on by efficient causes. And he says a lot of that is because we've lost an idea of any cause but the efficient or material cause, right? Sort of Aristotle's four causes, right? You don't have a formal or a final cause. People don't talk about purpose of life except in very general terms, right? You don't talk about things naturally becoming something or a thing ought to be in a certain way. He says, really, if you look at pre-modern ideas and debates on free will in those terms, not that everything is just an efficient cause and we're just material guided along that path. The opponents to free will were more so, well, everything has a final cause. Everything has been determined already in that sort of sense, a more metaphysical sense. And that was the big problem with discussions of free will prior to, whatever, date you want to say, sort of modernity begins and we lose those, other two causes. Really interesting topic, and very much related to what I was about to mention here in the book. But he does say, a purpose, a will emanates from God. This will has created our humanity and guides us now in ways beyond our understanding towards ends which even our reason cannot make out clearly. Providence acts through the instincts and intuitions of our feeble flesh. So a much stronger idea of sort of a final cause there with Coleridge, right? The sort of guidance that he's talking about isn't sort of the utilitarian sort of means only efficient causes to the end of material goodness, but a higher idea of the human ends. And I thought that was really good discussion
Yeah.
there.
Yes, good segue back into the reading materials too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Very good.
Um,
Incorporate a real world example of someone that you heard speak.
Yes, yeah, it's a very good lecture. It should be that they publish all of the talks on the Thomistic Institute podcast page. They're
Oh,
all recorded
I didn't know
live.
they had one.
Yeah. They have like hundreds of talks up there now on basically any topic under the sun. It's great lectures for the most part. So
But the Thomistic Institute is based out of where?
DC,
Ah,
yes,
very cool.
Dominican House of Studies by the Dominican friars out there.
I'll have to check that out. I've been kind of like bored with some of my podcast
Yeah, they have
people.
good stuff. I mean, all of them are just recordings of lectures.
Yeah, that's
So
fine.
it's somebody giving a lecture. But
I
no,
like
they're
I like that better. And what I really like are a good speech and a great question and answer session. That's like
uh,
my favorite.
They don't record the Q&As,
Yeah,
unfortunately, because it's just the microphone on the speaker himself. But yeah, no, the lecture's usually very good, so I highly recommend.
yeah. I'm getting kind of bored with Joe Rogan podcasts
Hmm.
because it's like him and some other comedian talking for 3 hours. Yeah, it's like
I could see how that would get boring.
there's going to be some, brilliant gems mixed in there, but there's a lot to wade through.
Hmm. He kind of goes on
Oh,
here a little bit.
he's still a great interviewer. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's amazing. You just kind of have to take a break from it for a while to really appreciate it.
Yes.
But anyway, so back to our guy.
Yes. He goes on, he points out this distinction. I don't know if you agree with this. This is on page 120. He says, Professor Crane Britton, not sure who that is, distinguishes three kinds of conservatives. The conservative of the dictionary, who accepts things as they are, the conservative of the flesh, who, contemptuous of his changing times, idealizes the past, and the philosophical conservative, the man who works out a consistent and timeless generalization applying to the behavior of men in politics. Coleridge, as the disciple of Burke, is a noble representative of this last type. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there are three types of conservatives? I think it's a little overly simplistic, and I think everybody's a little bit of both. But I thought it was interesting. The one who's just, you have to accept things the way they are, or idealizing the past, or a little bit more fluid, sort of more philosophically inclined. I don't know, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
Mm,
I don't think that there are conservatives that just idealize the past.
that's
You,
true.
you,
Yeah.
you never hear modern. You never hear a conservative, well, a thinker. You'll hear some comments here and there, but
Hmm.
you never hear a conservative commentator, thinker, writer say, "Yeah, everything in the past was just hunky dory."
Hmm.
There's, and I know that's oversimplifying what he's saying, but it's not just saying it used to be better. It's saying it can be better than what it is, and in some circumstances we changed for the worse.
Hmm.
We need to preserve the good, but we need to change the bad. That's the way I view
Yeah.
conservatism writ large. And then you have different, flavors of it, as far as your emphasis on economic or social or religious views or whatever. They're all, but I think that's generally, I think there's only one really category of true conservatives, and that's people that value that which exists and has existed that is good
Right.
and want to improve on that. and want to get rid of that which was bad while preserving that which is good.
Hmm.
I think. I mean,
Yeah.
because the it's not just to change things; it's to preserve that's what's good. That may be number one, and then two, work on the stuff to get rid of the bad stuff.
Yeah.
That, that's what I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I liked his other what?
Then there's fake conservatives.
Yes, of course. There's plenty of those all over the place.
It's a binary.
Yeah. You either
Either
are or you aren't.
yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Well,
Um,
I'm a neoconservative. What does that mean? Well, I'm a leftist who likes to invade countries.
did you see David French has an article out about, have you heard of this James Tallarico guy?
I refuse to discuss David French. I refuse to read anything by him or read anything about him. So stop.
All
I will
right.
literally turn this off right now.
I think that's fair. That's actually very fair. I think your life is probably 10 times happier for that. Yeah, so I won't mention anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of another example of somebody who I would say that about. Um, just somebody who's just kind of absurd, purposely absurd. Well, like who's a celebrity that just does stuff to shock you? Well, like The View. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't watch the clips of The View. Now I think they kind of mean what they say, but I don't like watching that, because it's just to get you upset.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really mean it. Maybe they mean it. I don't know, but it's just silly. But like, who's like a shocking person now? Okay, so I guess everybody's become so shocking. The
Yeah.
only shocking
Nobody's, yeah.
are the mundane people who go to church and just mind their own business. Well, that's shocking. Anyway, sorry, went on a rant there. So our listeners can, if they really choose to entice misfortune, they can look that dude up. But
Yes.
I have no interest, zero
Yes.
interest.
But I was
What's
going to move on to page 123 here,
you
where he's
did
talking.
that?
What's
Time's up. Time's up.
this will be, I think, the last thing that we can wrap up. Because I thought this was interesting, talking about
Yeah,
the church and state in
yeah,
terms of Coleridge here, talking about sort of the third estate that you don't really think about, the clerisy or clerks serving the church of a nation. And in some way, he kind of secularizes this. He says, like, part of their duty is theology, but also the clerisy is the function of national education. Some of the members of this estate should be engaged in study and meditation, most in diffusing knowledge among the people. So while the Christian church has these functions, they do not appertain peculiarly to Christian religion. They are the duties of the clerisy in any nation under any creed. They are the agents of cultivation, the means of their sustenance. The nationality cannot rightfully be alienated from the church. And I thought this was great. I think that's very, very true. And you've seen, this try to be separated more and more and more over the past, 70, 80 years, right? In the sense of if you want to have sort of a cultivated civilization, sort of a knowledgeable civilization, well, part of the religion is part of that. You can't just ignore them and pretend that they're not part of the political world. Clearly, they are. They are part of this whole community, part of this whole society. But they're too often forgotten about. Too often said, well, that's not part of the bigger picture here. That's private affairs and things like we've talked about in the past here. But I really like the way he put this about sort of the cultivation of knowledge, national education as part of their duty. I thought that was really, really interesting.
yes, yeah, and I think we're poorer for it.
Yeah,
We don't have the religious based instruction that our society had, even in my youth.
yeah.
Certainly before that. I mean, with the parochial schools and I mean, there were no the school sisters of Notre Dame, SS, let's see, SSND. You'd see
Hmm.
all the teachers were SSND,
Hmm.
and they would have like little parking placards, Sister Catherine, SSND, and that's where they teach park on the part of the reserve spots. I remember seeing those, and they were everywhere, but they
Hmm.
don't exist anymore because nobody evidently in their right mind would become a nun.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, you know, um, who would be happier? A person who goes into the convent at age 19 or some OnlyFans model? You we should have an experiment
Hmm.
where we pay $1 million to two beautiful young ladies,
Hmm.
and one of course, you'd have to take a legitimate vows. You can't fake it. They'd have
Right.
to actually have the calling. But have that person take vows, and at the end of the 5 years, they get $1 million prize.
Hmm.
Which of course the nun would probably just donate or whatever to the what do you call it, convent.
Hmm.
And then the other side would be some dirty whore who would be online doing whatever. And at the end of the 5 years, she'd get $1 million. And then you take a survey and see which one's happier.
Hmm.
You know, I don't, wouldn't everyone agree that the nun in a convent would be a happier person of those
No.
two choices? That's
Yeah.
not only the two choices they have, of course.
Right. Right.
They being the women,
Yes. Of
but no,
course.
but nobody is picking the nuns.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
know
true.
it's not a free shortage, but
Yeah.
right out loud, nobody's a nun, is there?
We actually have some on campus, like with the student center here, Mercedarian Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, I think is their full title. So it's
Vegetarian. Huh,
yeah, Mercedarian Sisters.
right.
So it's actually pretty neat to actually have like sisters around the student center and stuff like that. I think it's a very good thing that they're here and talking to college students and things like that. Because that's
Why
not
why do I think that Mercedarians are like fierce, like they should have brass knuckles, like they're mercenaries? You know, we're the Mercedarians. Like they should have spike studded rosaries. They
hmm
whack you over the head with them.
my
We're the
gosh.
Mercedarians. Now that would be a good show. I've been telling Eli I should have been an author. I should have been a writer
Hmm.
of TV shows.
Yes, yeah, that'd be a great show.
The Skunks youth group um,
Hmm.
was pitched to him as a TV show. The
Mm-hmm.
Oi, the Skunks.
Yes, yes, of course, of
I think
course.
the Mercedarians is even better. It's like the Flying Nun, but with like a real mace.
You should pitch that to a studio.
It's kind of like the show you never watched the show, the Supernatural with those.
I watched some of the episodes,
Yeah,
some of the later seasons. Yeah,
yeah. So they're like demon hunters. You can have the
yeah.
Mercedarians. They'd be like
Hmm.
a faction.
Hmm.
I think I'm onto something. Do you think the Vatican would approve?
Probably not. Probably
No,
not. Probably not.
I'd have to change their name just slightly and copyright it.
Yeah, there you go. But kind of continuing on, sort of looking at page 127 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to read this paragraph here just before section 4 starts. He says, "The cheerless atomic individualism of Bentham and the Reformers, predicated upon a sour reasonableness among men, upon the assumption that enlightened self-interest could replace every antique piety, came to just this end. And the reaction it provoked was a bitter collectivism as devoid of ideals as the utilitarian system. The radical liberalism of Bentham and the Manchester school is a dead letter now, but the conservative system of thought has outlived it, in part because Coleridge perceived the reality of ideas, the role of imagination, and the sanctity of constitutions." Then he just kind of goes into his conclusion then, where he mentions much of the same thing, right, about sort of the outcome of utilitarianism. But no, I thought this was a good chapter. I liked these readings. These are slightly less political figures, I suppose. I mean, Canning was prime minister, but for all of 4 months. But more so like in their writings, in their beliefs, right? Seeing the influence there, I thought was really interesting.
Do you agree with that the premise of what it was you just read that paragraph
I
that
think so.
that conservatism has outshone or outlasted
Mhm.
utilitarian? Do you think so?
Um, I don't know. I don't think it's outlasted it. I think utilitarianism is still very much alive. I mean, like you were saying, like a lot of our, legal procedure, a lot of our administrative state is just, very formalized utilitarianism. Um, I mean, I think conservatism, as he construes it, has better odds of outlasting. And I think you can kind of imbue some of the utilitarian systems with a more conservative idea. And I think we've done that to some extent, or there is room to do that to some extent. I do very much agree in like sort of the imagination, right, and the creativity that he emphasizes here. Because I think for far too long, and I think part of it's because a lot of the conservative movements in the U.S. just did become utilitarian, and that
Yeah.
just sort of was what they were for a long time. Not a long time, the left sort of claimed all of the arts, right, and still does, but I think it's slightly clawing its way back, especially with more traditional forms of art, sort of great books, programs, and things like that. That's becoming a much more conservative focused thing, as you're seeing more institutes pop up that aren't just critiquing everything old, and are actually like having appreciation for sort of a Western cultural artistic heritage and things like that. So I think if especially if conservative movements really capitalize on that going forward, which I think there are signs that they are. I think that is a very good sign for the future.
Yeah, and I think some of the most interesting writers are conservatives,
Hmm.
or being forced to become conservatives. And I think because there's so much criticism of them, their writing is getting better, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the left, especially like political or philosophical or religious writing on the left, is just so lazy
Hmm.
and uninformed. I think there's a real chance of conservative writers really taking the field in pretty short order.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope
Just
so.
more interesting to read for
Hmm.
those that read. That may be the problem. Nobody knows how to read anymore.
Very true.
Anyway,
Very true.
yes. Any last thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I enjoyed that chapter. Do you have any last thoughts?
I got lots of thoughts, Adam.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
You seem disappointed,
No, I'm not disappointed at all. Not at all. All
but
right.
I'm done.
Well, in that case, this has been
Okay.
season 14, episode 4 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
I am Mark Bishop still.
Oh, there you go. Switched it up on us.